there's a really good book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, who runs one of the biggest VCs in the world and was a successful founder, had a big exit. And he wrote a book basically about how hard it was. And one of the things he talks about is how the average rating out of 100 for CEOs is 21%, but no one knows that that's the average. So you're basically doing a job that you're completely unqualified for, and the buck very much stops with you.
The average rating out of 100?
The average competency score for a CEO is 21 out of 100, but you just don't know that that's the average. At every stage you get to, you've just got to learn a whole new bunch of things that you're probably terrible at. And fundamentally, the buck stops with you. And I think where it can be lonely is you have to kind of make hard decisions. You need to absorb the problems. But I do think that you can open up. It's just tricky because there's a lot of psychological pressure. There's a lot of imposter syndrome as a founder for sure. And you feel like a lot of stuff is your fault. It usually is. And so I think it's just dealing with that. And I think things like Founders of the Community. But one of the most amazing things about that is it's just getting in a room with a lot of people. You just hear how hard, everyone's finding it, or everyone's dealing with shit. And you're like, that person who I've been watching them on social media and looks like they've been smashing it. And then they're like, oh my God, the last few months have been a shit show. So I think that is very grounding. And it's just, you can then kind of share the burden, I think, because it's an isolating role in the way that, you are the one who everyone's looking at and it's down to you. But I think that can be shared. I think that in itself is a skill, is sharing that load, learning to be vulnerable with the team, all of these kind of things. But it's not easy.
As the CEO, there are quite big repercussions to you potentially being vulnerable with above and below. So above would be your investors or your board, and below would be your employees. So let's say you're struggling with your mental health as a CEO. If you share that with your employees, the person that they've been looking to for stability, for confidence, for assuredness to pay their salary, that person's now a bit shaky. And so then their confidence might get knocked. Or this is what at least you assume as a CEO, not necessarily true. The same goes for if you say that to your investors. Your investors, if you have investors, they sit on your board and they ultimately have the power to remove you as CEO. And I'm not saying this is all investors, but investors, the stereotype, usually aren't the most empathetic. If you don't hit your targets, they're breathing down your neck, and any sign of weakness, you could get replaced any moment. And so there's a lot of risk associated with speaking with each stakeholder above and below you. And so that's why then communities like Founders work really well, is that the people aren't related to your business. No investors are allowed to come into Founders, and so therefore we're not expecting you to open up and your investors sitting across the table from you. It's just people who just get it.